Hello, everyone. It's Kate Mulligan here from Toronto, Canada. And I'll be your chair today for our session on social prescribing around the world. And I hope some of you were able to join us for some other developments in global social prescribing earlier in the day. But even if not, you're going to be hearing lots more fantastic work that's happening right around the world. And we're going to get started right away. Please do use the chat box to enter your questions for our panelists, and I will read them out. We should have an opportunity for questions after each presentation, and then with luck, we'll have an opportunity to have a group conversation toward the end of our hour together as well. So let's get started, and I'll pass it directly over to Clare and Alison, who are going to be talking to us about the Scottish Social Prescribing Network, creating a social prescribing network for Scotland.
Thank you, Kate. Delighted to be here this afternoon, so thanks very much for the opportunity to speak about the Scottish Social Prescribing Network. So my name's Clare Cook, I'm the Regional Manager for Spring Social Prescribing here in Scotland, and I'll pass shortly to my colleague Alison Leitch, who is the Area Lead for the Community Link Worker Programme in North Edinburgh. So for the next few minutes, I'm just going to chat to you about our key developments as part of the network. Just before I go on this slide, the overall aim of the network is to develop the strategic direction of social prescribing, which includes sharing of learning, information, good practice and lessons across different initiatives in Scotland. It's also important to note that the network was established at grassroots level, so these are people who are at the forefront of social prescribing in Scotland. And this is something that we've actually been commended on several occasions and is quite unique compared to the other three networks in Scotland. So in June 2020, I established the network as there was nothing in existence here in Scotland, and due to the pandemic, social prescribing through different guises of community connectors, social prescribers, link workers, these services stepped up and rapidly adapted, and they used innovative approaches to support the people in their communities, and they continue to do so. We've established a steering group to drive the network forward. We have 8 people that are part of the steering group, and we're all part of different programmes and initiatives across Scotland, so we've got quite a good breadth across the country involved. The third sector and community-led health organisations were and continue to be a lifeline for people in their communities by reducing pressure on healthcare, NHS and statutory services. As when we were developing, we met with the other UK networks, so England, Wales and the All Ireland networks, so we're really grateful for the support that we've received. As a network, the 8 steering group members, we managed to secure some funds to create a website, which you'll see on screen. And we also have a Twitter account as well, so please follow us on Twitter. And I'm going to finish on my slide with a key session that we had in September last year. So this is one of our key developments. So the session was facilitated on the 30th of September last year. The steering group recognised the need to hold a session to explore social prescribing in Scotland at the time. So the purpose of this session was to identify the challenges, the positives and what actions we can take to progress the network. During the session, it was a very positive session. We targeted key policymakers. So people that attended included people from Scottish Government, from Public Health, academia, the third sector, and we also want to thank Dr. Michael Dixon and Dr. Bogdan, who came up from the English network and offered their valuable advice during the session. So I'll pass over to Alison now.
Thanks, Claire. So the ongoing developments of the network, we have been working with Scottish Government, but to give a bit of an overview, in 2019 NHS Scotland stated that social prescribing fitted well within the ethos of Scottish health and social care policy, which calls for increased integration of services to ensure that they're received when and where they're most needed. Social prescribing has often been defined in Scottish policy context as an approach or range of approaches for connecting people to non-medical sources of support or resources in the community which are likely to help with the health problems that they are experiencing. Prior to the Scottish election last year, there was a manifesto commitment by the Scottish Nationalist Party to build on the success of the existing Community Link Worker programme, which had been a manifesto promise at the 2016 election, and to introduce a further 1,000 mental health link workers. This has now been included in the current programme for government. Separately, the Royal College of General Practitioners in Scotland issued a manifesto setting out the priorities of general practice for the term of the Parliament, and this included action to tackle health inequalities through the co-location of money advice services within GP practices and the rollout of community link workers to all practices in Scotland, prioritising initially those practices servicing populations with the highest levels of deprivation. In addition to health policies, Scottish Government also referred to social prescribing within culture and sports strategies. It is recognised that engaging in culture can reduce social isolation and improve social connections, whilst engaging with physical activity can improve mental health, help with weight issues and associated health conditions, whilst also benefiting overall health in general. We all know that primary care is experiencing a huge level of demand, and social prescribing can play a vital role in helping with the challenges facing society whilst reducing pressures on state services. The third sector and community services have the benefit of being able to respond quickly and responsively to local needs during the pandemic. However, social prescribing can only be as good as the services available to link people to and must be funded accordingly. Part of the recommendation from our event in September was for a framework structure for social prescribing to be introduced so that there is an overarching view within Scottish Government. We'll continue to work collaboratively with the Government to ensure that social prescribing is firmly established and embedded within Scottish health and social care. Thanks.
Sorry, apologies, I cut the presentation short. That was the last slide anyway. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And we do have time for a question or two before we go to the next presentation. So head over to the chat box if you do have a question. I'll start things off. First, I'd like to introduce my co-chair, Dr. David Robinson, who had trouble logging in today, but he's here now. So welcome, David.
Thank you.
And we do, I'd like to ask a question because we're undertaking some similar work here in Canada, really trying to get a social prescribing network started. So can you tell us what were some of the biggest challenges that you've faced to date? And what do you think are some of the bigger opportunities?
I think we've got loads of challenges. I think we've came quite a long way in a short space of time as well, but I think the biggest challenge for us is we are working closely with Scottish Government. I think that's a real positive on our behalf and Scottish Government. I think they're taking it really seriously now, which is excellent to hear. But I think we have two health ministers and it can fall under both their remits. We've got other ministers, it can fall under housing, it can fall under money advice. So within Scottish Government, it's not falling under one person's remit, and I think there's a lot of work to be done there. But I am really positive with the work that we're doing, and we have regular meetings with Scottish Government civil servants, and we're hoping to meet with the ministers soon as well. Alison, I don't know if you have anything else.
I think just worth reiterating that the 8 of us that form the steering group, we do this on top of our day jobs. So it just shows the passion and the enthusiasm and the absolute belief that social prescribing has a place in health and social care. And we bring a wealth of knowledge and experience from right across the country, from far in the north of Scotland, and all the different demographics and geographical challenges there are. So we're confident that we'll make this work.
Can I ask, so as you know, the Irish network linked in with yours as well. One of our challenges has been participant representation. Have you thought about that, or have you, in terms of your governance and forming the network?
I think we've discussed it. I think what we need to do, and it's within our recommendations from the report from September, is we need more clinical representation around our steering group. As I've mentioned, we're all leads in our different fields, but we need clinical representation. But I think what we were thinking is possibly having themed groups. So that might be a possible theme for our network. we are very new, we've got lots to learn, and we're really grateful for the learning opportunities we've had from the other UK networks, and we would continue to do so. So any suggestions, we're welcome to them.
Absolutely, and I think what we would like to do as well is to be able to map the services across Scotland, so that then all the different support services, whether it's through training, community groups, they then know where all their programmes are, so that it can be shared learning, shared funding opportunities, shared evaluation, different forms of evaluation, patient stories. As Claire says, there's a lot of opportunities, and we are very early days.
I see we have a question from Lisa. Please go ahead.
Hi, it's not really a question so much, but more of just a thought, and just to say, you know, really delighted that this is happening, and you're doing such amazing work. And I'm from Scottish Ballet, and we have a range of dance health programmes, and I think what you'd said, Claire, about capacity and time as well, and doing this on top of your job as well, your other jobs, I think that's what we've really struggled with, that we have all of these programmes that are evidence and we know they work, and it's just about finding how do we as an arts organisation navigate through this absolute minefield that is the health and social care system. So anyway, really great to have met and seen you today, and we'll really love to knock on your door and connect with you further if that's okay, because I think this will be really great, a great level of support and connection for us in the work that we're doing too.
Yeah, absolutely, Lisa. Drop us an email and we can definitely set a meeting up, and have a look at our website as well.
Great.
That's great. Thank you so much.
So just before I turn it over to David to continue, I'll just mention that Ruth Ann Baxter has added to our chat. Anyone can join the Scottish Social Prescribing Network via our membership page. It is at scottishspn.org. scottishspn.org. I'll get back to other questions as we toward the end of the presentation, and we'll be able to return. So if you think of something you just didn't get it in there in time, don't worry. We'll do our best to get back to it after the next presentations. David?
Thank you, Kate. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Dragana Vidovic from the University of Essex in Colchester, who's looked at loneliness in the Republic of Srpska, looking at the prevalence of loneliness and healthcare usage to build a case for social prescribing in that part of the world. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and sorry that I ran to share my slides, so you had to look at them for a while there. So let's see if I can see to the next slide. So just briefly, where the country is located in Western Balkans, the red part is the entire area of the country, with darker red color showing the part of the Republic of Srpska. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So just a quick background, the 1990 civil war ended with an agreement that resulted in a complex set of political, geographical, and administrative divisions. So the country has 3 different healthcare systems, 3 different governance structures, 3 different presidents that rotate every 9 months. So it's very complex bureaucracy. And due to that, we focus on the Republic of Srpska in this first instance. We are also looking in this case study, because global prescribing is, or social prescribing is becoming a global response to public health challenges, and there is limited evidence on the applicability of social prescribing across various cultural and country-specific contexts. In particular, little is known about implementing social prescribing in a post-conflict society. And for instance, in 2019, there were 30 countries or more experiencing conflict, and unfortunately to this we can add case of Ukraine now as well. So more work is needed to see how social prescribing can be implemented in these settings as well. Furthermore, population health in Bosnia and Herzegovina is likely to worsen if service delivery, design, facility management, and financing issues are not resolved. And there is a high level of socioeconomic deprivation. All this is resulting in potentially a likelihood of increase of health or spending on health from people out of their pocket spending, but also how much the government is going to contribute to health spending in the following decades. The blue in the graph is government health spending, and green out of pocket. And this is from the Global Burden of Diseases report. So we've then wanted to see potentials to implement social prescribing in a novel setting where this type of intervention hasn't been implemented before. And we first started to think about, well, is there a need, and how can we assess need for social prescribing? And so we looked at loneliness rates and healthcare usage, and then we discussed the structures that are needed to implement social prescribing. And you have heard about all of this throughout the conference, about loneliness being linked to increase in healthcare usages, and social prescribing being useful tool to address loneliness. So we've collected data on 1,231 individuals aged 16 to 86 and above last year in May. And we asked people on various questions about COVID-related stressors, loneliness, social networks, depression, anxiety, well-being, health, and social care usage. And to our knowledge, this is the first type of this kind of data collected in the country. So after running some models, negative binomial regression for count data, we found that overall, there is an increase in usage of GP services with an increase in loneliness scores, and this differs for different age groups. However, this relationship is only statistically significant once we introduce the presence of chronic mental and physical health conditions. So these conditions mediate this relationship between loneliness and increase in GP, general practitioner visits. In regards to A&E services, we find that this service usage increases also with an increase in loneliness scores, and this is significant for ages, statistically significant for ages 44 and above, regardless of the presence of chronic health conditions. When it comes to visiting a specialist, the visiting specialist significantly increases with the increase in loneliness scores for all age groups. So given that there is a need, from what we can see, we've looked at the structures to implement social prescribing. When it comes to having a referral pathway from health and social care professionals and others, referring people to various programs in their community and activities, or people referring themselves, there is no such thing existing currently. Again, this hasn't been implemented there before, and it is possible to develop something like this with, of course, significant investments in training. And so I really like the idea, for instance, of help hubs in Norfolk and Hertfordshire. If you haven't heard about them through the presentation, they're really great programs. When it comes to community resources, there are cultural heritage arts societies and youth centers. They have spaces, they have active members. And so they could be used to deliver these services there. Also, there's a large civil society sector. Number of non-governmental organizations were established to focus on peace building, justice, migration, refugee issues. And now that some of that stuff has been addressed in Bosnia and Herzegovina, these organizations that could take over and contribute more to implementing health initiatives and work in this aspect as well. In terms of understanding where the resources are, that's very much not clear yet. There's not a map of or a website where you can go and find about resources and what's available in your community. So there's lots of need there to map the resources. Also, when it comes to data sharing, storage, and confidentiality structures and all that comes with recording data on social prescribing, that would need to be developed, and of course, with adequate training. Very interestingly, there were a number of activities in 2019 in a city of Banja Luka, where my co-authors come from. And so they've there was a initiative, Banja Luka Human Face, in 2019. In just 1 year, they organized 480 activities, more than 2,500 participants, 40 organizations came together, and was very well successful and supported by local authority, and it was developed and led by our co-author, Sonja Stančić. So again, there is interest, but COVID has interrupted some of this stuff, so hopefully it would restart again. I know this might not be a big news to people from some other parts of the world, but having, for instance, an online profile or online website portal where people, individuals 60 and above, can go and read some information about how to be physically active, how to deal with things in later years of their life is quite relevant. And so that came out as well in recent years. So there are potentials to build something, to build a structure to implement social prescribing. And I think there is interest. However, what we found is that most of this potential is in major cities like Banja Luka. And so more is needed to establish similar initiatives in smaller towns and rural areas, in particular because the country is geographically, and these parts, smaller towns, are geographically isolated because of mountains and big rivers and so on. So more work to do. And that's briefly us. Thank you very much for listening.
Very much. If people want to raise their hand if they have questions to ask. Yep. I can't see the chat, so Kate, I don't know if there's any questions in the chat at the moment.
No questions in the chat just yet.
Can I ask, loneliness and social isolation are very complicated, and often you can be socially isolated and not be lonely, and similarly you can be surrounded by people and still be lonely. The loneliness scale that you used, was it based on any standard instrument?
Yeah, we've used the instruments recommended by the UK government loneliness ONS official national statistics. So it's the UCLA 3-scale question, and then also the direct question of loneliness from Community Life Survey, I think uses it, and ELSA survey as well. So yeah, we pretty much mimicked what is happening in the UK in terms of measures.
So we have the Irish longitudinal study of aging, which is 10,000 people, and they use the UCLA loneliness scale as well. So the interesting comparisons to be made there. Kate, you've been interested in mapping as well. We both have been interested in mapping, don't we? We could talk to you about that.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes, time to develop a mapping network.
Yes.
I have another question about developing social prescribing in a post-conflict society, as you mentioned. What advice do you have for people about what you've learned so far and what they should be thinking about if trying to implement social prescribing in a similar context?
So one of the kind of first concerns to think about is the depth of trauma that people in conflict societies experience years and years later. And so the recent conflict in Ukraine has triggered a number of discussions in Bosnia and Herzegovina where people are absolutely afraid. And the online social media, people that I know there are really feel that everything is coming back again. And this is 30 years later. And so they are part of it is because, due to economic conditions and things like that, insecurities, that things haven't been addressed. But part of it is also that is something that it takes, in some cases, a long-term management. So it's almost like a long-term health condition that for some people you have to kind of consider it, experience of war. The other thing is that the positive side is that I feel like social prescribing, with the amount of connections and the way that it's structured to bring together organizations that need to work together, to bring around people to interact, it has such a potential for peace building that I would love to think about how to develop this further use it as a tool there as well.
And I can maybe just comment on that, but from a more remote position, but because there were 2 jurisdictions on the island when we created the network, the social prescribing network, you mentioned 3 governments essentially, or 3 administrations. So on our network, we have people from north and south in every, and it actually was a real help in terms of it's an all-Ireland network and representatives from north and south, and we've got 2 jurisdictions to speak to. So that was a help. I don't know if that is helpful to say that. Yeah,
no, that would be such a dream to have it actually between, on a country level, to unite these 3 different parts of country. There are still issues come up and calls for violence or in politics and all kind of stuff. So it would be great, I think, because health is such a unifying goal, and well-being it should be unifying goal. And so I would love to see something like that. So congratulations to Ireland.
I'll hand back over to you, Kate, for any more questions.
There is a question in the chat box, and there's also, I think, a raised hand. So I'll get to the chat box first. We have Marsha, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Marsha Rose, asking, can I ask about social prescribing for men's mental health due to rates of depression and suicide? I'm undertaking my PhD looking at social prescribing in men's health. Is this an issue that you're experiencing?
So suicide rates, this would be something my co-author could speak of, because she's a professor but also practicing clinician in Bosnia and Herzegovina, clinical psychologist. And so I can definitely get you more information about that. I'm not sure, but I know from just her saying, I don't know statistics, but I know from her saying that it is a real issue, especially in former service men and women who were involved directly in conflict.
Okay, and we have a raised hand from Joe. Go ahead.
Hi, Kate, and hi, David. Well, it's two things really. The last question in terms of suicide rates. We've just had the first ever women's health vision in 72 years of the NHS, and what that's brought to the fore is, although there is a absolutely appalling suicide rate for men, women are 6 times more likely to attempt suicide, but that never gets into the headlines. And that's actually been quite fruitful in relation to exploring social prescribing resource to address issues around perinatal mental health, postnatal depression. So it's actually creating some traction. So I think there's room in the room, as it were, for both. But I also wanted to reflect back on your point about basically conflict. Now, I don't know whether this applies in wider Europe, but the UK has had some significant investment in violence reduction units, which have taken a really positive approach to population health and prevention. And they're really looking at when basically health inequalities start. So we've got violence reduction units in England who are actually addressing basically issues around literacy through creative writing within prisons, with a view for upskilling those men, so we don't end up back in prison 6 months later because they can't get jobs that allow them to live in reasonable accommodation. And I'm certainly aware in the northeast of England, the violence reduction unit there has funded social prescribing posts. And I'm based in the northwest of England, and I'm an NHS England facilitator at the moment. And we've just had 3 conversations with our separate violence reduction units who've just got 3 years funding, which is really important because they've been limping along for the last couple of years with just an annual amounts. So they're looking for investments, and they're also taking a rights-based approach to health. So just some top tips really, but I'd be really interested in any developments in terms of the work that you're doing around trauma, because veterans, again, within prisons tend to mirror some of our most vulnerable communities, often mental health issues, learning difficulties, etc. And so there's so much need for us just to address those issues in a holistic manner. Sorry, that was a bit long, Kate.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for those comments and for explaining further the issue with suicide rates and gender thing there, and also for mentioning the violence reduction units. I will look into it. Thank you.
Shall I hand back over to you, Kate? You're going to take us to Taiwan.
I'm not sure if our presenter from Taiwan is on the line. Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Hi, Joy. I didn't see you prior to the session. Welcome to our session. I'll hand it straight over to you to talk about bottom-up initiatives.
Yes. Okay. Do you see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You do.
Okay. Then let me start. So hello everyone. I'm Wei-teng, a PhD candidate at UCL. Today I will share what social prescribing is going on in Taiwan. And have you ever thought that social prescribing schemes would be carried out by the local cultural organizations themselves, not being asked by the government? and promote social prescribing across the country. So from the bottom-up initiatives. So here I'm going to show you 3 case studies, hope you will get more understanding of what and how we implement and promote social prescribing in Taiwan. Okay.
Wei-teng, I'm just going to ask you, could you put, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. Could you try putting it in presentation mode so that we can see your slides a little better?
Oh, okay.
That's good. Thanks.
Is it better? Okay, and the outline is divided into 4 parts, including aims and creative agent movement to social prescribing development, and the 3 case studies, introduction and conclusion. So we will look at what social prescribing is going on in Taiwan. To be honest, we are still at the early stage of developing Taiwan's version of social prescribing. About 20 years ago, the concept of accessibility, which flourished in the UK, was introduced by some museum scholars to the Taiwanese museum sector. This concept dramatically impacts many museums and cultural organizations, encourage cultural organizations to offer better services for people with disabilities and special needs. And along with the society change, our community is aging. So more and more cultural organizations start to look at after older adults, their needs. So even the older adults with cognitive impairments. So the accessibility concept stimulates the creative agent movement in Taiwan, and also the social prescribing development in the cultural sectors afterward. Okay, our version of social prescribing has been developing in the cultural sector since 2019. Since then, fewer museums and cultural organizations have been planning and carrying out different kinds of social prescribing schemes, such as museum on prescriptions and concert prescription, and so on. These cultural institutions have found that they have a social responsibility to provide outstanding programs and services for their target audiences. So more and more cultural organizations cooperate to co-promote social prescribing in the cultural sector, helping to appear more other organizations to join them and offer better services, even to embody the concept of accessibility. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, we had a creative agent movement in Taiwan before the development of social prescribing. So several cultural institutions provide excellent senior programs for older adults during the period, such as Hongdao Senior Citizens Welfare Foundation and History Alive. So the Hongdao Foundation has offered many fantastic programs, such as My Fashion Show and then the Takuro audio guide projects. The fashion show programs brought older adults to the second-hand shops and then dressed them up in the very fancy clothes, and also to the salon and to have their hair cut and styled, so helping them to show their beauty. And History Alive had offered like storytelling workshop, intergenerational theater, and oral history workshop, etc. This experience built up a very strong foundation for development, our version of social prescribing. Okay, here I'm going to share 3 case studies to show how the museum have carried out their social prescribing schemes. These cultural organizations include National Museum of Taiwan Literature, National Taiwan Museum, and the National Symphony Orchestra. Due to a time limit, I couldn't go into great detail about each case, but I will give the most striking feature of each case study's social prescribing schemes. So let me go through them. Okay, the first one is the National Museum of Taiwan Literature. This museum is a heritage building from the Japanese colony, and it is located in the old town. So there are a few century-old shops nearby. The most striking feature of their program is used the local surroundings to plan their programs. The museum used this advantage to design its unique museum programs for older adults with mild dementia and their caregivers. So that they can just so the facilitate will to facilitate programs, and then to help them to help older adults interact with the objects and the exhibitions. Even they can walk out to the museum buildings to interact with the local business and the local shops to infer and to foster the older people's social abilities. The second one is National Taiwan Museum. The Taiwan Museum planned its social prescribing scheme and the staff training sections based on the multi-sensory learning theory and the interactive experience model. So before planning the program, they also invite the cross-disciplinary professionals and scholars to attend a meeting and to create their programs together. They try to use the two different theories to put them into practice, not just copying other museum special programs. So they plan the sessions by engage the older adults' smell, touch, hear, and vision sensors, just like looking at the exhibitions, touching the museum objects, and even making their artworks and having their portfolios and virtual exhibitions. That is a last one. It's a National Symphony Orchestra. So they roll out the concert prescriptions, invite older adults with a mild to moderate dementia and their family members to join the NSO Master series with general public audience. And after that, the NSO also had 3 music making workshops for the older adults to use their household goods and their bodies to create their own music. Okay, here is my conclusion. I have 3 takeaways for you. The first one is to use the sensory engagement approach to plan the senior programs, even staff training. The second one is to create the familiar environment for older adults with cognitive impairments when you are carrying out the programs. The final one is utilize the participant-centered approach to plan the programs for people with special needs and visitors. Okay, that's my presentation. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, just ask me. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wei-teng, the seniors fashion show is my new favorite thing. I hope there's another. Okay, yeah, we have a comment in the chat. Someone else saying they absolutely love the senior fashion show. Is there a place online we can find out more?
Yeah, it's very cool, I think.
Congratulations on what you've been able to do. And David is a gerontologist, so you may have some. Have you encountered similar arts-based initiatives across Ireland?
Yes, I think it's really interesting that you've gone for the sensory approach. So, you know, I mean, even the fashion is touch, it's also visual. And then with the museum, you mentioned all the different senses, and then obviously music. You've mentioned, you know, you've gone for all the senses, because people with dementia often just live in the present. Their memories are unreliable, and the future, none of us know what the future holds. So I think that bringing a person back into the present is very valuable. We do have a couple, so we partner with the National Art and Design Dublin's a small city, and the National College of Art and Design is right beside us. So they do modules where they come into we have a therapeutic area. We also have residential areas. They come in and they do art in situ. And we partnered with the Irish Museum of Modern Art, which is also beside us. And they have specific programs for older people, and then also for older people with dementia and their carers. And so, yeah, similar programs, and very powerful when because we see this all the time with social prescribing, when you've got two very different service providers, very different sectors interacting together. Yeah, we love it.
Very interesting. Yeah.
So I have a question. You know, often when we do see some of these arts-based programs, they're very small and very limited in nature, maybe one time only even. But some of the ones that you mentioned had huge numbers. Can you tell us about how those logistics were managed?
Okay, yeah, I just gave the 3 examples, right? So each one, they all have the 10 weeks programs. So they have 10 sections, because one section 1 week, and they continue 10 weeks. So every section, they have a different kind of contents. Some of them are to do the object handling, or some of them to making their artworks, even like the Museum of National Museum of Taiwan Literature, that have the music therapist to facilitate the programs. So the facilitator will bring the musical instruments to make the audience and the old people to play, and also to make their own music, and even sing the old songs together. Yeah.
Well, I love it, and I love the intergenerational aspect as well. And I hope the young ones grow up thinking about social prescribing and this kind of work as something that's a normal part of their upbringing, and that social prescribing is just something they come to expect. There is a question here from Joe, wondering, Joy, if you're connected with the British Council work with the National Museums Liverpool, or colleagues in Japan who are exploring the role of museums in healthy aging.
What is the question? I couldn't understand.
Sorry, are you connected with those doing the British Council doing work with the National Museums in Liverpool? And also, are you connected with any of this work happening in Japan?
Oh, okay. Actually, the National Taiwan Museum, we just published the manual, the museum on prescriptions, the manual. So teach the museum professional and the volunteers how to implement or design the social prescribing schemes. And this manual was to how to say that the Tokyo's art museum, something like that. And then it says, oh, you want to translate this manual, and then to encourage the Japanese museum staff and to design this kind of museum as well. So we do that. But now no further, no other collaboration. But in the following years, probably we have.
That's great. And I'll just, before David sends it to our final panelist, I'll just remind us that there is one more networking session left in the day. So if you want to make connections, look for the table that has the name of this session, and you can follow up. I see Joe's in the chat box saying she wants to help make links and share contacts with you.
Great. So it's my pleasure to introduce the last piece in this section, and Caitlin, and I'm going to bring you to Ontario. Could be far from you, Kate, I don't know. It's a big country. So Caitlin Muhl, who works at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, is going to inform us about creating an infrastructure for social prescribing there. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So I'm just going to open up my slides here. Probably take a moment to load. All right. Can somebody just let me know if you can see the slides, then I'll get started.
Yes,
good.
we can see them.
Yep, see them, yes.
Okay, so my name is Kate Mulligan, and I'm a PhD candidate at Queen's University. And I would also like to introduce my colleague, Helene Woodhouse, who is an MBA MPH candidate at Brock University. So our presentation will focus on our efforts to create the infrastructure for social prescribing at a community health centre in Ontario, Canada. But before we get started, we would like to acknowledge our team members, Madeline Law, Erin Walters, Tara Pascoe, Joanna Linsdale, and Jenny Stranges. Perfect.
Okay, so thank you, Caitlin. Sorry, just, I think the next slide. Okay, anyway, so there is a growing interest in social prescribing in Canada, and this is largely due to the fact that Alliance for Healthier Communities recently conducted Canada's first social prescribing pilot that ran between 2018 to 2020. And the results of this pilot were incredibly promising. So shout out to Kate there. But this has led researchers to now call on healthcare providers across the country to incorporate social prescribing into practice and ask their colleagues to build the evidence base around social prescribing in the country. So Canada's first social prescribing pilot was conducted in 11 community healthcare centres across Ontario, Canada. So in Canada, community health centres are not-for-profit organizations that provide primary healthcare as well as health promotion programs for individuals, families, and communities. And this work is rooted in the model of health and well-being, which we can see on the slide here. And this describes a shared commitment to holistic care. So Quest Community Health Centre, which is located in Ontario, Canada, was not involved in the social prescribing pilot in Canada, but it supports individuals experiencing social, economic, and cultural barriers by providing primary healthcare services and promoting wellness, community, and social justice to their community. So for background, Quest Community Health Centre social prescribing client survey revealed that clients both want and need social prescribing. So when we asked if clients had attended any of the programs or groups offered by Quest, 70.6% of them said no. When we asked what had stopped these clients from attending the programs, 40.6% of clients said that they were not aware of the options. And when we asked what supports might help clients to be able to attend these programs, 45.7% said that they would like to be able to talk through the options with a staff member, and 45.7% of clients said to be able to walk through the entire process with a staff member. So to us, this is very clear that the Quest Community Health Centre clients both want and need social prescribing. And therefore, the aim of our work was to create the infrastructure for social prescribing at Quest.
You're on mute, Caitlin.
So sorry, thank you. So drawing on the social prescribing guidebook that was released by the Alliance for Healthier Communities, team members worked together to create the infrastructure for social prescribing. So one of the things that we did was create a process map to outline each step in the social prescribing pathway. And this was a really important part of this process to ensure that all staff members were on the same page about the social prescribing pathway. We also created a social prescription pad for healthcare providers. So this contains the client name, provider name, date, and 6 social prescription options. They include looking to connect with others, looking for a hobby, looking to better my mental health, looking to better my physical health, looking for support with my basic needs, and other. We also developed a social prescribing menu for clients and link workers. So the menu contains a comprehensive list of internal and external resources that are divided into 5 menu topics. They include social connection and sense of community, hobbies and common interests, mental and emotional health, physical health, and basic needs. We also developed an evaluation plan right from the outset of this project. So this plan consists of a convergent parallel mixed methods approach, which includes a process evaluation to evaluate the implementation of social prescribing and an outcome evaluation to evaluate the effectiveness of social prescribing. We also worked with data experts to establish social prescribing documentation in the electronic medical record. This was a really important part of this process to ensure that social prescribing would become embedded into practice. We also conducted social prescribing training sessions for staff members, including separate sessions for healthcare providers and link workers. And finally, we held a social prescribing launch session for clients. This session allowed us to increase clients' awareness of social prescribing, and it also reconfirmed for us that clients want and need social prescribing. So when asked what aspects of wellness clients would like to improve, 100% of clients said that they would like to improve their emotional wellness. 80% of clients said that they would like to improve their physical and social wellness, and 60% of clients said that they would like to improve their financial and environmental wellness.
Okay, so in terms of findings, team members successfully created the infrastructure for social prescribing. The social prescribing guidebook played a crucial role in guiding this work. The time and effort that the team members put into laying the groundwork for social prescribing was critical to the success of our launch of the social prescribing program at Quest. And to conclude, team members created the infrastructure for social prescribing, which was key to the launch of the social prescribing program. And through PDSA, or Plan, Do, Study, Act cycles, improvements will continue to be made to the social prescribing pathway over time at Quest. And an evaluation of this social prescribing pathway will be conducted. So So with social prescribing gaining momentum across Canada, we anticipate that this work will help to advance the evidence base on social prescribing in our country. And that concludes our presentation today. Thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you very much. I have a comment and two questions. The first comment is it's fantastic to see the ground up approach, that kind of network approach, grassroots approach, where you've rolled it out and then you wrote the manual. There was a fear in the UK, the NHS were producing a toolbox for social prescribing. We did the same thing with the Irish Health Service, or once it becomes top down. So that's the first comment, and the first question comes from that, because you mentioned social prescribing across Canada. Do you have any plans to disseminate that model or to expand that model across Canada, or to a wider, to other projects or services?
Great question. Colin, do you want me to take this one, or do you? I will contribute, and if Colin wants to add, she can. Absolutely. I'm all about, let's not reinvent the wheel here, and let's share. The Alliance for Healthier Communities, in partnership with other organizations, has actually created these communities of practice. So we're involved in the Ontario community of practice and the Canadian social prescribing community of practice. So I envision us kind of, disseminating what we've created and sharing that with others, so that we're not reinventing the wheel. And that's kind of something we've believed in from the outset. Colin actually did interviews with other community health centers who were involved in the pilot to see what they've done. And so we ourselves didn't even really start from scratch. We wanted to kind of build based on what was already there in Canada. So to answer your question, absolutely, we want to be sharing this with others.
And then just the second question on the aspects of wellness questionnaire. What were the numbers of clients that you were asking those questions of? Like, was it a lot? I didn't get a sense. I might have missed it.
Colin, I don't know if you know the exact numbers. I want to say it was around 40 to 50, but I can't quite recall the exact number. Colin, do you know if that was right?
I think it was between 30 and 40.
It was interesting.
Yeah. And that was mostly, sorry, go ahead.
It was interesting they weren't looking to you for their spiritual wellness, either an agnostic population or they're finding that somewhere else.
That's actually interesting you added that, because after we created the menu, we kind of went back and had to add another section, which is like its own kind of separate thing, because it's not quite as long as like the rest of the section. So it's its own separate thing, but it is like spiritual wellness and culture.
Anything popped up in the chats there, Kate? I didn't see any hands.
There are a couple of comments in the chat. One is around age groups. Is this program across all age, the whole age life course?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. Quest does tend to cater more towards adults, but they do serve clients across the entire life course. So yes, we will be targeting all age groups with this.
Dragana in the chat box is just saying how fantastic this is, but also especially around asking people what they'd like to improve, so that we have, you know, the involvement of the people and the service users in the quality improvement pathway. So thank you very much for that. And on that note, I'm going to declare my bias because I was involved in the Alliance's pilot work and with the Canadian networks, and I also sit on Caitlin's doctoral committee. But I was really interested to see how you are using the voices of service users and people in this work, because my own experience is that community health centers, because they offer health and social services under one roof, tend to say that they're already doing social prescribing. But your findings showed there were a lot of people who weren't accessing the social programs, for example. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Was that result surprising to the people working there?
Yeah, when we talked to the people working there, it wasn't really surprising because they kind of have this core group, their advisory committee, and they're very eager to get involved in things, right? They're always getting involved in the groups that they offer. And then there's all the other people who, you know, they're just not reaching. And that's kind of what that survey showed. And it's, you know, they really think it's because just because you offer this group, it, you know, for some people, they need that support to actually, you know, make that decision to get to that group, and to just post about a group happening. That's not going to, you know, cater to some groups who need that support with Quest. And so that's really what social prescribing is that, you know, having that link worker to be there with that person to support them in that journey. So it wasn't surprising to them, and it really confirmed for them that this is something that they need to be providing. Colleen, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure, yeah. I think that in terms of like the staff, there was a little bit maybe of hesitance or pushback because their plates are already so full in what they do. And so for us, when we were creating kind of like our process map and what social prescribing might look like, we wanted to make sure it was as efficient as possible and didn't add too much to the plates of the employees who were already feeling a little bit overwhelmed. And so we wanted to like incorporate it into what they were already doing, but kind of make it so we could collect the data that we need to. And so clients were taking that next step to actually attend the programs that were recommended to them.
There's another comment here that the recently published Health Accord in Newfoundland and Labrador is recommending a new approach to transforming the entire healthcare system, and it includes reference to social prescribing. So I encourage people to check that out. Joe is interested in sharing lessons learned from England, which just launched social prescribing for children. And then Dragana has one question. I think it'll have to be our last one because we're getting close to the end of our time here. How did you go about selecting what elements should be in the infrastructure around what's needed? The graphic that you showed on one of the slides with all the steps.
Yes, so in terms of, I think the question is kind of how did we decide what pieces were needed to create the infrastructure? That was something that was heavily guided by the social prescribing guidebook that was released by the Alliance. And really we kind of used that as our recipe almost for how we were going to do this, because we didn't want to, again, reinvent the wheel. So that's kind of, you know, where we went. And also, like I said, Colleen interviewed other community health centers that were involved in the pilot. So we heard from them, you know, how did you do this? How'd you make this work? And we kind of learned from them to, you know, build the process map, for example, or, you know, create the electronic medical record documentation system. So that's kind of how we did that. Colleen, did I forget?
No, I was just going to kind of wrap it up. But I think Caitlin and I both approached this project with like a very kind of tunnel vision, like social prescribing is great and we want to do all these amazing things. But then we have to go back to our team and kind of collaborate and just make sure what we're suggesting is actually feasible. So we've kind of had to meet in the middle with Quest just to make sure that the things we're doing and suggesting would work for their community health center. And we've had a lot of success with that so far.
Absolutely. And I think there's one line in the guidebook and it says, you know, don't wait until you've perfected it to launch social prescribing. And we kind of, you know, thought about that throughout this process. Like, we'll do our best, but we can't wait until this is perfect. We're going to launch and then we'll improve over time. So that's kind of how we.
What a great way to end our session. We are at time already, and unfortunately we didn't get to talk all together. So let's continue the conversation at the networking table. If for those of you who can join, don't forget to go back to the last plenary session, which is about co-producing priorities.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.